Steve here. The purpose of this slideshow is to walk you through the final assessment essay, primarily the first draft, but also to talk about what the final product will look like. So I'm just going to go through it step by step and then show you an outline of an example that I threw together. So the task, this is for your final assessment essay, which is due in week 8, but in week 4 you have to turn in a draft of this paper. So you would choose a contemporary ethical issue and write an essay in which you apply the 3 major ethical theories to the issue. The final paper will be about 1,000 to 1,250 words, but the draft just needs to be between 300 and 500. By draft, we don't mean your first pass at it, we mean an essay. It's just a briefer version of what you'll eventually do. So you'll turn that in, and I will give you comments on it and try to get this back within a reasonable amount of time so that by the end of the semester you will be able to use those comments to flesh out your final paper. So the basic structure of any paper you would write, typically an academic type of essay, you would have an introduction in which you say what you're going to do. Then you would have the body of the paper in which you do it, and then you'd have the conclusion. This paper should be several paragraphs, probably at least 8, and I'll tell you where the breaks in the paragraphs should come. And so the body would, the intro might be 1 paragraph, and the conclusion 1 paragraph, but the body would be, 6 or 8 paragraphs. Okay, so once you have the basic structure in mind of the introduction, body, and conclusion, then we can see how that would work with our more developed structure of the actual paper that we're working on. So your first paragraph will be your introduction, where you set up the issue to be discussed, 3 theories to be applied, etc. So you'd say, well, here's the issue I'm going to discuss. I'm going to apply these 3 major ethical theories to it, and then I'm going to draw these conclusions. And then your next paragraph would be, you would briefly discuss the issue. You say, well, the issue I'm going to discuss is this. It's controversial for these reasons. Some people think this, some people think that. I'm going to try to clear things up by applying these 3 major ethical theories and drawing some conclusions based on them. So then you'd have a set of 4 paragraphs at least. You may break them up into more, but you'd each one for each of the theories. So you start with utilitarian and say, okay, well, the utilitarian view says that our actions and laws should promote the greatest happiness or promote the common good, and it applies to this issue as follows, and then explain it. And then you go, so, well, on the other hand, Kant's duty-based ethics says that our law should be universalizable, and our actions should follow rules that we can make into universal laws, or it should show respect for persons. Our actions and laws should do that, and it applies to this issue in this way. And then finally, the virtue-based. Well, virtue ethics, a la Aristotle, focuses on character traits that make one a good person, such as justice and courage, etc. And then this applies to this issue this way. And then in the next paragraph, the 4th one in this section, you'd say, okay, well, these views might agree on some areas, but they disagree on others. Well, utilitarians think this, and where the Kantian would think this, and they would not agree, etc. Then you'd have another paragraph, say, well, your view. Well, maybe you agree with the utilitarian view. Maybe you lean more towards the Kantian view. Maybe you agree a little bit with one, a little bit with another. Maybe you have some other view, a divine command view, or a view based on self-interest, or something else that you think would be relevant to the discussion. This could be 1 paragraph. It could be more than 1 paragraph, depending on how much you want to discuss your own views on the matter and how much you want to further develop what you discussed earlier. And then finally, you just have a concluding paragraph where you wrap it all up. You say what you did. Say, well, in the preceding paper, I discussed the following issue. I applied these theories to it, and I came to the following conclusions. So that's basically the developed structure. So in all, you would have, at the minimum, 8 paragraphs, and on the draft, that sounds like a lot, but it would only be about 125 to 150 words per paragraph. Clearly, the first one and the last one would be the shortest paragraphs. And for the final paper, it would be 125 to 150. But for the draft, it would only be like about 40 to 60 words per. This is an example that I have of just came up with an issue I didn't figure that anyone would discuss, and hopefully you could discuss this issue if you want to, although it's a little whimsical, if you will. But there's parts left out here. I'm not going to show you a complete essay. I'm just going to show you how to approach it. So first off, you have to choose the issue that you're going to discuss. You need the question. So the issue I chose was robot rights. And then the question is, should intelligent robots have civil rights equal to persons? Why or why not? So that's the question I'm going to discuss, and then I'm going to apply the three theories to answering this question, because it's a should question, and so that means it's a question about actions. It's a question about what we should do, and talking about civil rights is a question about laws. So it's a question about what kind of laws we should have. So that's the question I'm exploring in this essay. And so my introduction paragraph. So should intelligent robots have civil rights? This is a major issue facing our world today. In this paper, I will examine this issue and apply three major ethical views to it. ... There's more there. I will conclude by suggesting that robots should have limited rights. And that's just saying, well, what I conclude in my paper. And then I discuss the issue for a paragraph. Civil rights for intelligent robots is a great concern in the modern world, etc. And then, to set up the next section, I just do a transitional phrase like, well, let's see what these three theories have to say about it. And then the utilitarian one, well, the utilitarian, here's what it is, and explain what utilitarianism is. You may want to use a direct quote from the text or from the lecture or from somewhere else. You don't have to. Better to put it in your own words. You don't want more than 10% of this essay to be someone else's words, and you always have to make sure that you cite your sources when you do something like this, and that should go without saying. And then I move on. By contrast, the duty-based ethics of Kant does not focus on happiness, and instead it says this, and this is just me laying out what the Kantian duty-based ethics says, and then again there's ... which just means there's more to say here. How does it apply to the issue of robot rights? And that's what will be discussed in what follows. And then the virtue-based ethics, again, a third major ethical theory. This view says that character is most important, and again, how does this relate to robot rights? Does it relate? I mean, this may be a little more difficult. We think, well, maybe only human beings could have virtues of character, etc. And the analysis, the two theories agree in some ways and disagree in others, and then I explain briefly. And then my view, my personal opinion, leans more toward the utilitarian. Again, this is your view based on what you may totally disagree with what the theories say about the ethical issue. You may have some fourth theory that you think is applicable, that we either discussed in class or that you've heard about, or that you may not think it's an ethical issue per se. And then finally, you have your conclusion. I just do a standard kind of conclusion. In the preceding paper, I have discussed robot rights from three theoretical perspectives, and I've offered my own view. In conclusion, ... Right? And so this gives you the basic layout of the whole paper and how, dividing it up into paragraphs. That's a good way for you to structure it. You can, a lot of times when I write a paper like this, when I'm doing my own stuff, I start out with an outline and just a header of what each paragraph is going to have in it, and then work on each one at a time, and it's just a series of many. Just really every essay, really every great work of literature is just starts with words, and words are made into sentences, and then sentences are made into paragraphs, and paragraphs are made into complete essays or chapters, and then those go on to form books and even series of books. So it all starts with a single word, of course. So again, you follow the basic structure, and then the more detailed structure that I spelled out there, you really shouldn't go wrong. And again, I'm going to give you feedback on this once you turn it in a reasonable amount of time. I may not be, given the number of people in the class, it may not be within a week, but it'll be well before the final draft of the paper is due. So have a beginning, a middle, and an end. Say what you're going to do it, and say what you did. So good luck.